What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another Detroit Lions mock draft. I think the last time we did our pre-recorded mock draft was last Friday. Maybe that was 2 Fridays ago. I don't know. By the time you're seeing this, it's probably Friday because of the time that I'm recording this. And again, why today? I have no idea. Just because I made a mock draft, I liked it, and I was like, you know what? Let's do a video. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with another mock draft. Now, we're going to continue to do trades in this mock draft. And if you saw the last video, it's probably going to be a pretty similar format to that, where I talk about the player for a few minutes and then I move on. Okay, this is not a full breakdown of the player. I'm hoping to have those all on DoseOfDion.com here. Okay, there's like really nothing over there right now. Some of them are unlisted, so you can't see them. My hope is to put a lot of the notes that I have for those players, but my first plan is that I'm going to be doing rankings probably by each positional group, or maybe like a top 75, top 100, something along those lines. Maybe a little bit different than your typical top 50, where I'm not as much so focused on like the top 5 players, but everybody else outside of that. Because like I said, this year I've went through more players in more detail than I ever have by far, and I'm at a point where I feel really good about where I'm at, but you know, every day I'm like, okay, what about this guy? I got to go rewatch that guy, and that's more of what happened today. So hopefully something like that. I'm hoping that maybe next week I could start diving into that, and then we're just up to the draft. We're just doing different ranking videos, mock drafts, of course, and then hopefully I put them on the website, at least some of them. That way you guys can get a sense of at least my grades, final grades for each player, because some of them I still have to work out the final grade. The separation for guys that I have tightly kind of ranked together. With that being said, though, let's dive into this. Actually, first off, a little disclaimer. So you may read by the title that this is a defensive mock. All right, I don't want to give you any more than that than us getting into it, but it actually definitely turned out that way. But that was not intentional whatsoever. I just did it, and then I looked at him like, I'm telling you, as soon as I looked at it afterwards, I'm like, oh dang, that was defensive heavy. But it was a lot of fun. Is this probably likely going to happen? No. All right. I'm not going to predict the mock draft right. However, I'm taking guys that I like, and I try to really stick to that in this mock draft. So this one got creative, trying to get new players, of course, as always. So let's get right into it. We're going to start off again because I can't give you any good suspense with a mock draft. It stinks, but I can't. We're going to start off at the top, and here's actually a way that I think I changed up this mock than most of our mocks, which is weird, but I didn't trade out of 29. I mean, it's a perfect spot to move, whether that's up or down, because, you know, the census usually does like 15 to 20 first-round players. That's kind of what I heard on this one. That's kind of the belief, and I think that does make sense. And you know, your consensus first-round guys, that is probably in that range. So depending on who's there at 29, the Lions could have a lot of guys clumped similarly and say, yeah, it makes more sense to go back if there's guys that we really like. Meanwhile, on the flip side, if the Lions feel like there's a real deal that could make sense with so many quarterbacks getting pushed up to the front, it's also a great position to go jump up in the draft. I mean, it doesn't have to be extremely significant. Like maybe you go get that last first-round guy that you had. Maybe that's in the early 20s, or maybe it is a monster trade and something like that happens because the Lions like, hey, this dude's standing out there because so many quarterbacks went early. This great player sitting there at 15. Let's go get that guy. So it's a great opportunity to move up or down. But in this case, we're going to sit at number 29 because not everybody's going to trade in the back end. And maybe the Lions don't. I'm sure they're going to want to have a pick on first round, being that it's in Detroit, but I definitely hope that they don't do their draft strategy around that. I'm okay if they trade back. It'll hurt that night, but I'm okay with it. With that being said, though, we're going to stay here at number 29 and make a pick. And with the 29th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Darius Robinson, defensive end, Missouri. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time. I'm actually going to spend the least amount of time on this one, just kind of fly through it, because this is one of those players I actually have a full breakdown on this channel, and this was before we got some of the combine results. For example, like testing out, measuring in just over 6'5", 285. We had the pro day recently. He tested in really well there, 28 bench press reps. Spent too much time with the breakdown side because there's literally a full breakdown, and it's one of the biggest deep dives that I've done on a player for the draft to this point. So that's definitely worth checking out. We know that he's from Michigan. First off, I love the scheme fit. I think that he could fit for a lot of defenses, but I definitely think he could fit here. I really liked him on the edge. The fact that he's an interior player that's stepping out wide gives me a lot of optimism, because some of my, knocks against him when going through the player was like, okay, I need to see a little bit more from a guy that's going to win on the edge consistently. And then you figure out the background. You're like, oh man, okay, now I buy in even more. The strength is incredible. I think there's a lot of craftiness and savviness to the way that he sets up tackles. I think he positioned himself really well. He's dominant against the run. Obviously, he has the background of a guy that can step inside. I love the energy that he plays with. I'm just a monster fan of this player. And it could be as simple as, hey, he kind of plays the Pascal Kaminsky role. He could be a guy that you step outside and just play wide. I really liked him playing that stand-up role outside of an offensive tackle. It just feels like a Lion to me. And I don't think I've actually done a mock draft where I've taken Darius Robinson. This guy feels like a Detroit Lion. We know that they had seemingly interest, it sounded like, in Calais Campbell when he was available. Not saying this Calais Campbell, but I think when you talk about the skill set that's there, right, he may not be the most agile player, and I think that's one of the biggest knocks that I had for him was agility, but the power is there, the length is there, there's so much upside within the tools, the pass rush ability is there, dominant against the run, and like I said, I think he has a real ability to just shed blocks consistently. I love this player. I love the fit in Detroit. Let's make him a Detroit Lion. And the great thing about this is, you know, he could plug in and start if you want him to, but as Dan Campbell kind of laid out, like there's going to be a lot of guys that are drafted that may not start just because of where our team's at. It's a great thing. We're going to raise the floor. So it's not like I'm drafting him thinking that he can't be a starter. I think that he absolutely could because there's so much flexibility he can be put really everywhere on the defensive line. I mean, if the Lions wanted to bulk him up and make a DT, they could. I wouldn't do that, not in this scheme. I'd keep him out a little bit wider. But at the same time, you talk about as a future pick, I love what this could turn into for the Lions. So I'm going to go Darius Robinson. He checks a lot of boxes for me. And based on the board, I think he was my top player. He's up there right now for me. I think there's a lot of guys that have like kind of tight in that group. So it is mixing it up a little bit, but I do have a pretty high grade. And if you go back and watch that video, reason I gave the grade that I did wasn't just based on what he had shown. A lot of it was based on like, I'm willing to buy into this player, making it happen. So I'm willing to buy in at 29. Let's continue on. And this is where we get our first trade. We have to have trades in these mocks. Why? Because it's fun. All right. And we're using the PFF simulator. So if I don't, like I said, you'll kind of get the same group of players. So I want to move around a little bit. All right. And we know there's going to be trades. Lions will likely trade. They usually do. So let's make it interesting. So the Detroit Lions, we originally had the 61st pick at the end of the second round. I decided to move back into that third round. No fifth-year option issues here. We're just going to move back 6 spots. Washington was interested, and there's usually like gaps here in the second round, but for whatever reason, they were interested 6 picks back. I don't remember why they moved up, but they wanted to, and I always try to follow the trade value chart to try to keep it somewhat reasonable. So in return, I asked for pick number 139. Definitely helps because there's such a gap there between 73 and 164. So I love that it just fits in perfectly. It's definitely willing to move back only 6 spots. I feel good about that. There's a lot of players that I like this spot. So I moved back 6 spots. Trade happened. And with the 67th pick in the 2024 NFL draft, we're going off the wall with this one. The Detroit Lions select Junior Colson, linebacker, Michigan. Okay, now look, last mock draft, I think we took Chris Jenkins, so people are probably automatically calling me out like, yo, you're just taking Michigan dudes. Absolutely I am. I have no bias towards that whatsoever. You guys know that if you watch my stuff, I don't care, to be honest. With that being said, Junior Colson to me, and I haven't went through every linebacker, of course, but recently I've started to dive into the off-ball linebackers, and I think he's got a case, and it'd be a tough one. You know, I'm a big Edgerrin Cooper fan. I like him a lot. Just got done rewatching Peyton Wilson, to be honest with you, and then also some of the later kind of mid-round picks at linebacker, and there's certain guys I like for certain traits. I think that Junior Colson in kind of a weird linebacker market, depending on what you're looking for, arguably could be the best linebacker in this year's class. First off, he had 36 starts, and he's only 21 years old. Okay, so in 3 seasons, 36 starts. That's because Michigan's played in a lot of big bowl games and things like that, so you love that experience. And I don't think that he's maybe the most polished linebacker in every sense whatsoever. He's also not the most athletic linebacker either, but I love what he brings in today's NFL, which is, to me, flexibility at 6'2", 238. I think he brings some of the best stoutness that I've seen for a linebacker. That's just not easy to find. I think he's really strong in that category. Again, he's not like a Derek Barnes type of build necessarily, but he brings solid arm length at just over 32 inches, real stoutness, real contact balance, finds a way to consistently get into tackles late, right? He just finds a way to pick up a ton of assist tackles because he just slides through, doesn't get pushed off the spot very often. I think his shed ability is above average. He's good at navigating traffic. Honestly, as a blitzer, Edgerrin Cooper, right? I like the body type there, but there's still a lot to be desired for me. He can close, right? This guy can't close with Edgerrin Cooper, but as a blitzer, the success rate to me was one of the best that I've seen. So I was just like, man, I didn't expect to see that whatsoever. So he honestly might step in and be our best blitzing linebacker. I don't think we have great blitzing linebackers outside of Derek Barnes. Malcolm's pretty good at it too. He could step in and be one of our best on the team. His tackling is pretty darn efficient as well. And then when it comes to zone coverage, fluidity-wise, he's not the silkiest or smoothest mover. Definitely not like the Peyton Wilson level whatsoever. I mean, that guy looks like a safety. You don't get that with Colson, right? It's not that smooth. It's not that fluid transition-wise. But what you do get is a very smart zone defender. Just kind of bought into as I continue to watch is like, man, this guy's legit in zone coverage. You go to the interception against Washington towards the end, you see the depth that he creates, the way that he finds routes. Again, he may not have the most upside here, right, in comparison to other backers, but it's so sound. He's a 3-level impact player. I think that his man coverage, it's enough, right? It's enough. You don't want to put him against receivers, but it's enough there. I just think he's a super well-rounded player. Biggest thing for me is for a guy that's 21, I thought that his football intelligence in terms of like instincts that you'll see, some of the slowness in terms of once you get him a little bit wider outside of the A-gap gaps in terms of reading the offensive line scheme, and then communication pre-snap. Like, I didn't feel like he was the guy running the show. I thought that he was kind of there and part of it, but I want to see him become the guy running the show. But I think for the Lions, where they're at with Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell now going in year 2, now you had the vets between Derek Barnes, Rodriguez, Jalen Maben. It's a lot, right? Did not pick this because it's a position of need whatsoever, because it's not. But I think that that's a spot where he can really use that time to grow, right, and develop and maybe rotate in and out. I think that he kind of needs that, to be honest, because I think that's the big step that needs to take place. But for a guy that's only 21 with this much experience, I think he's so well-rounded. I'm just going to do it. This is one of those, like, hey, forget the draft need. I'm just taking who I think is the best player available, moving back in the 3rd round. And Junior Colson, to me, like I said, I think he's got an argument to say I'm the best linebacker in this class. I went with Junior Colson, linebacker out of Michigan. Again, I think he feels like a lion. And that came via trade back. But with our 3rd pick, we have, of course, another trade back. Because what kind of mock would this be if I didn't have back-to-back trades? I mean, that's just what we do. All right, if you've seen the live streams, we trade back. We trade up. In this case, as the Detroit Lions, I decided to trade back once again. So you acquire some of them late round picks, of course. Now, this one I did a little bit differently because, again, I was trying to follow the trade value chart. Honestly, when I did this, I felt like, man, I probably could have gotten more. I try to stay so close to the trade value chart, but I probably could have gotten more. Regardless, though, at pick 73, and that would be 6 picks after my last pick, I decided to move back. I didn't need 2 picks that close together. So I moved back with Seattle, and Seattle gives me pick 118 and 81. So I'm jumping back 8 spots. In return, they're getting 73 and 164. So I did give them a 5th round pick back. I didn't just take their 4th round pick. So I essentially swapped to go up like 50 spots. I don't know that a team would actually be interested in doing this, but if there is someone there that's standing there that you love, maybe that team has him in their top 50 and he's there at 73, I guess you go up and do it. And with pick number 81, the Detroit Lions select Andrew Phillips, cornerback, Kentucky. Now, this is one that I'm going to give credit to Easy on this one. Not because he was like, yo, draft this guy, but because Speakeasy brought this up in our live stream, like, hey, Andrew Phillips met with the Lions. He brought that up, and I was like, okay, I've seen Andrew Phillips. I found my notes, and I was like, I don't have enough here. I was like, what was I doing with my notes? And to be honest with you, I think I was like half asleep when I took my notes on Andrew Phillips because some of my notes were to the wrong player. And I was like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. And when I went back and rewatched, I was like, okay, this would make sense. Like, if you were trying to tell me, like, hey, the Lions would like an Andrew Phillips, I'm not saying they do, I don't know. But if they told me that, I'd be like, I'd believe you. Because Andrew Phillips, who's listed in at 5'10.5", 190 pounds, which is pretty well built. I mean, he's not on the thin side for also being on the shorter side. That would probably be a concern. He tested out incredibly well. I mean, you look at the 42.5-inch vertical jump, which is incredible in explosiveness, and you see the twitch in the lower body, the plant and drive acceleration is incredible. The 40 time was really solid, 4.48. He's a guy that typically plays in the slot, especially when teams go like dime package, but he can play wide as well. He's played both cornerback alignments. 16 bench press reps kind of speaks to kind of the build that he has, the strength that he has. It also speaks to the run support that he gives. Like, to me, I thought the run support was one of the biggest standout things here. I loved the toughness. I thought that he was big time, like pushing an elite grade here. I can remember when I had done Brian Branch, and obviously he's a slot corner / safety, but when I looked at Brian Branch, the favorite trait I had was his run support. And he was awesome. And there's so many examples where he's getting off blocks and he's kind of showing a little bit of slither, and you're like, man, that guy's making big time plays. Like, he was arguably our best run defender last season. It sounds crazy, but he was incredible. The amount of plays he made there, forget coverage, was game changing. I mean, he never had to come off the field because he was so good against the run. And to me, this player, not to that level, but the toughness is on that level. I think the consistency as a tackler is the thing that pulls it down a little bit, because you'll get too many opportunities where he's just kind of flying by on tackles. And that, to me, that's the biggest issue. But he is fearless on contact. One of my notes was his eyes stay open through contact. There was an example where he took on an offensive tackle head on. I mean, he just threw himself into him, and I was like, what the heck? Yo, he had no fear whatsoever. I want that guy. I assume the Lions will as well. The biggest redeeming trait for me is simply the reactive athleticism in coverage. I think he's great in this category. I mean, his 10-yard split, I don't know what the heck it was, but I would assume it was pretty solid. The explosiveness, the twitch, it's all there. Plant, drive. And the weird thing about him is that he might be his best as a man press corner, yet at the same time, he didn't really do that from the games that I went through at Kentucky. He mainly played off coverage and zone coverage, and I actually had my lowest grade for him in zone coverage. I thought he was below average here, and a lot of that came through, kind of just communication defensively, passing off zone coverage, just responsibilities there where I thought it was a little hit and miss, losing his blind spot consistently in half turn. Like, I mean, he would leave guys completely wide. There were speed outs where guys would just run wide open. It was like he has like no vision on this guy whatsoever. And off-man coverage, which I thought was a tick better, but I didn't think it was much better. I thought that was still not great either. When you talk about just anticipating route breaks and then getting on top of it, like, you didn't see that necessarily. There were things that I liked, but I didn't see that. And you get flashes like, oh yeah, he's lighting that dude up. But to me, it was the press coverage. And you specifically saw this in like goal line situations. But I'm like, man, the skill set's there because you get the patience, you get the foot quickness. I think that for him, his hips are a little bit tight, and you see that in transitions where he has to kind of flip himself around. But he's a guy that can get physical. He's got all the background traits that make him successful as a press corner. I think he's probably better in man coverage. Again, I think the hip fluidity is a little bit concerning there. The play speed was good. The ball skills are solid. There's going to be some length issues for sure, but the ball skills in terms of in trail position, the comfortability in those spots, the competitiveness at the catch point, to me, like, this is one of those players that absolutely could fall into round 4. I would not be surprised whatsoever if he hit day 3, but he also has the makeup of a guy that if you're sitting there at round 3, and maybe this is a tad early, but if you're sitting there around 3, I'm kind of going off the simulator, that a team maybe towards the end could sit there and say, we just like the makeup of this player. Let's draft him. And I think for this, we've seen the Lions draft guys that are, team captains. They have the right makeup. That's what I'm doing here with Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky. We're going to throw him into this cornerback unit, but, I do like it. To me, my comps were a mix between Meek Robertson, who's now a Lion. Of course, I'm better with comps with Lions because I know the players. Meek Robertson because of kind of the physicality, the speed that he has, the twitch that he carries at a smaller size, and also Clark Phillips last season, who went to the Atlanta Falcons in round 4. Like, I get some vibes there just in terms of the way that he moves, some of the hips again, some of the issues there. So overall, Andrew Phillips, you are a Detroit Lion. All right, let's continue on. So we had 2 trades there, and of course, we have to make another one. Lions are going to trade up now. So I acquired these late picks. Let's start to put some of that to use. Honestly, this isn't the craziest trade, but I'm moving up from 118 to 109 in this year's draft. So it's only 9 spots, trying to follow trade value chart. I think I'd be a little bit undervaluing this pick, giving them 201 in return, but I don't like throwing in future picks. Maybe you have to with one of these. I just don't like doing it for the sake of it because I don't like saying, like, I gave up future picks. So in this case, we made that trade. I think it was close enough. We move up 9 spots. Maybe I didn't even have to here, but I think on the simulator, he probably would have been gone. So at pick 109, the Detroit Lions continue to go defense. It's the 4th straight defensive player. And this is Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle out of Duke. To me, Darius Robinson, a lot of flexibility, but I think they're 2 different players. Like, I get the flexibilities there, and it's great, but I think these are absolutely 2 different players. 6'2", just over 300 pounds. And first off, you talk about being a Lion in terms of he's a 3-time team captain, which I absolutely love. I love the motor that this player plays with. He's constantly finishing around the football, whether that's downfield or in the backfield, constantly finishing around the ball. And to me, this is one of those guys that would thrive in, again, kind of that attack and react style. Like, let him play upfield first. And it's not because his first step is necessarily elite, though I think, again, he can cover some good depth laterally. He does have some twitch in the lower body, but it's just because of the play strength. He can play behind the line of scrimmage, and the flashes you see of that are like, yo, that's awesome. The core strength is there. You see the ability to kind of sink himself down and create like a driving anchor. I love the torque that he creates, and he just gets movement. He can live behind the line of scrimmage, and you see a lot of good. Now, there is some bad in terms of positioning where it kind of gets all out of whack. He doesn't do extremely well against down blocks. Combo blocks can kind of throw him off the spot. Doesn't necessarily seem to anticipate, position himself for that, and handle it. Same thing with zone blocks at times. It's like, okay, not necessarily anticipating that. And he's also not tall enough for some of the direct, just standing kind of almost straight up right off the line of scrimmage that you get, not always leverage himself down. Then he gets a step behind. Now he's trying to make up and recover, and his agility is fine, but it's not that, to recover consistently. Though you see some of that agility as a pass rusher, and it mainly shows up as a stunt rusher, very controlled and balanced, but as a pass rusher, while I don't think he has the deepest bag of tricks, though he does flash some of that spin counter. It's like, that was a little nice. He does have an ability to create walkback, and he has the energy to do it. He has the hips to do it, to create torque, and he has the strength to do it, to dig in and just walk you back. And he's one of the guys that actually had more consistent walkback than most. Plus, he has solid length on top of that. For an interior guy that's only 6'2", to have 33-inch arms, I'll rock with that. He tested in well, sub 5-second 40-yard dash, 32-inch vertical. Leaving the first mock that I did, which was on Bleacher Report, I took Dwayne Carter, and I hadn't watched it a ton, but I took Dwayne Carter, and then I think I heard his name brought up today because it was in my mind. I'm like, let me go check that out. I gotta have notes on this guy. I pulled it up by Binder, and I was like, I do have some notes. Let me watch a little bit more. And I was like, yep, I like this guy. Let's make it happen. Plus, a 3-time captain does not hurt. We go defensive line here. All right, now let's finally address the offensive side of the ball because we have not done it. And this wasn't like I realized it, so I was like, I got to make a trade, but I did make another trade. So, yeah, we're having some fun with this. Again, I'm not trading future round picks, but my next pick was 139, which was acquired earlier, and that was given to me first trade that I made, which was in the second round. So, yeah, we moved back 6 spots with Washington. They gave us 139. So I took 139, packaged it with 205 in the 6th round, which we already have, and I moved up to 122 with the Chicago Bears. And with this pick, we go offense, and we go receiver. Malik Washington out of Virginia. Now, this was one of those picks where, and I really am trying to do this where you guys know coming into this year, I don't want to just draft players because it's like, well, they have to go this direction. This has to be the need. They have to take this style or this position. Because like last year with Jack Campbell, I had seen Jack Campbell, but I kind of never focused on him after the first time watching him because it's just like, they're not taking an off-ball linebacker. I just took that out of my mind. And I think with receiver here, while I'm trying to do my best to not overlook any position, I think I've done a pretty good job with that. It's the style that I think I was overlooking. And I kind of get caught up into like, oh, they have to take this style because Josh isn't here. But what if they don't? What if the Lions are just like, hey, we want receiver help, but it doesn't have to be that style? Because now I start to pigeonhole myself into like, it's got to be this size, or at least it's got to be like 6 foot tall. You know, can I make it work with like Jermaine Burton? Like, I don't want to do that. And for me, Malik Washington, especially on this mock draft simulator, my goodness, is this guy awesome to watch. Like, is it just another guy where when Brad Holmes says, like, we turned a card in, we're like, man, we love this player. That's the vibe I would get from what I've seen in Malik Washington. Really all these picks. But, like, I would be like, yo, I love this pick as a Lions fan. I love this. He's just under 5'9". I know you're like, yo, what? 191. Speaking of Andrew Phillips, his good build, this is a player that literally looks like a running back. Now, he's not Malachi Corley to me with the ball in his hands. However, what he does have is some of the best hands that I've seen. I mean, just reliability. The focus is incredible. And you see it like the easy things. He's just watching it and watching into his body. But it doesn't look like it's, you know, one of these like, oh my goodness, okay, tensing up, or I'm trying to move away from contact, or I'm double catching it because I'm really locked in. It's none of that. It's natural, but he's very focused. And it happens in contest situations where you're like, yo, that's so easy. And then I was like, okay, the overhand technique, so buttery. But what about underhand, right? How is he going to do in those situations? You go to NC State. Watch the last drive, like 4 catches in a row, underhand. I'm like, this guy has it. His hands are incredible, and that's where I always start with for my critical traits there. However, moving on from that, this is a guy, the big concern to me is play speed. First off, you're in a 4.47, doesn't play to that whatsoever. Okay, he had 19 bench press reps, 6'8", 7'3" cone, which I love, 42 and average vertical, which is incredible for explosiveness. He doesn't play to that play speed. I mean, it doesn't look like he's 4.47. I struggle to believe it. With that being said, though, I think some of that, he doesn't open up his strides consistently. Some of that's route tree, and his route tree was slightly limited. You get fade routes, you get hitch routes, right? You get some complex routes in level 1, but it was a little bit limited, some post. Yet that being said, I love the way that he ran routes, right? He wasn't a biggest separator. I don't think he's going to excel there, and my biggest concern is his ability to get off of the press, right? I think that's a concern, not just because he's on the smaller side, but I don't think he's super sudden, and I think when you saw cornerbacks be able to park right on top of that first step off the line, he could have some issues trying to shake, and that's a problem. I think he's got to lean a lot more into his physicality. Like, yo, take some notes from St. Brown. You're strong enough, just bully this man through the stem. Like, get him off balance, create some leverage, and play through the half man. I think he needs to add that so he can create more separation consistently in those spots. That being said, though, his route running was amazing. From timing to me, ability to open up other receivers by just running off routes, then also the aspect of timing within his own routes, like allowing things to develop, allowing things to set up. I thought the discipline was big time between eye balance discipline, also just, you know, the trajectory of his route running. He wasn't going to fade into routes. He could get flat out of his breaks. His routes that he ran were very crisp, very well on time. He's very timely oriented, and I loved that aspect, and I think that's huge in this offense. A lot of movement. You'd see the FBI. He could play in different spots. To me, again, the savvy was, you had some savvy there, right, where he could kind of utilize top of the route, like, oh, let me give you this little stutter, and then I'm going to take off. But there wasn't enough there. There wasn't enough shake in his game. The vertical speed, again, you didn't see it. The play speed didn't match. So I think he's a very good run after catch player with awesome hands, and he's a guy that I love the way that he runs his routes. There's other things that I'm a little bit concerned of, and my biggest concern is I think there could be some limitations in terms of, you know, against the press and having some of that shake that you're looking for, but his feel for the position, I love the way that he plays the game, and his route running, his hands, I'll buy into that reliability. We're going to go with Malik Washington. All right, let's continue on because we got one more pick to make. And at 249, the Detroit Lions wrap up their draft. How did I end up with 249? I didn't trade that away? I guess not. Probably because it's not like worth anything. But at 249, the Detroit Lions select Matt Lee, center out of Miami. Now, I'm going to be honest. From what I've seen of Matt Lee, I don't know that this guy actually goes this late. Like, this feels like one of those players that absolutely could be drafted higher than this. Probably like round 6-5 type of range. I could see that. Could be wrong, though. Biggest concern is, honestly, his weight. He was weighed in at 288 at the Shrine Bowl. That's not good. I think he also could be very much so limited to center. I think his length is there, but his play style feels like it could be a little bit limited to center. However, the biggest thing that I like about this player is reactive athleticism, mainly in the sense of he is so quick off the line. He's so quick into his sets, run blocking and pass sets. He shows ability to get depth very quickly against blitzing linebackers that line up head over him in pass rush situations. The reactive athleticism is such a positive that I'm willing to bet on, like, this guy's going to stick with somebody. He's going to stick with some team. Probably not as a starter, but he's going to stick with somebody. And for the Lions, it's like, okay, I would love the flexibility, but if I drafted a guy and you told me, like, he's a solid backup behind your center, I'd be like, I'm on board with that. I'm on board with that. And maybe he's a guy that within his frame you could add a little more weight. I mean, he feels like he could. He's not really thick or stout in the lower body. So I guess that could be a little bit of a concern. And to me, what was so good is that he was very successful. And I thought he did a really good job against Braden Fisk, for example, at Florida State, though we didn't see him directly. I thought his control was really sound because he played within himself and he knows how he plays, though I graded that below average just because I think that's going to translate a little bit worse to the NFL. That being said, though, his ability to create an anchor was firmly in his skill set. Like, hey, I'm going to dial myself back, get my feet back, I'm going to create some forward lean, and I'm going to sit this anchor down. And he was a successful player. I just think the reactive athleticism will show up as an issue in terms of transitioning. He lunges. He doesn't play with a ton of knee bend. He probably doesn't have a ton of drive blocking power, though he does create some with his power steps so he can push guys off and get up to the second level. He has an ability to sustain because of his footwork. He plays with real feistiness and nastiness where if the block isn't clean, he's going to battle you. He's not going to throw linebackers around at all, but he's very quick with his eyes, very fast in pass protection, very quick to get up to the second level. His own blocking scheme to say, I'm going to stick with my man or I'm going to get up to the second level. Very sound in that sense. So to me, this is a guy that has a ton of experience, right, from UCF. He's a 5-year player, got a ton of experience. With that being said, though, there could be some limitations in what you could completely ask him to do. So there's probably some cap on some abilities here, but the hand placement's consistent. It's inside. He knows how he wins. And I'm going to be honest, I'm buying into this player, man. I think this is a really crazy spot to get this guy at just because of the athleticism alone. If we know one thing about the Lions going after O-linemen, they like their athletes. And if you look at his testing scores alone, right, just 25 bench press reps, we can rock with that. You look at the 31-inch vertical, almost a 5-second flat 40-yard time, a sub 8-second 3 cone. I can rock with it. The length is good. I'm going to roll with Matt Lee out of Miami. So right there is your Lions 7-round mock with trades. That thing is defensive heavy. All but 2 picks were defense. We went 4 on defense. This D-line is completely revamped. You now get Carter to mix with Levi and Aleem. I love that for the future, but also just rotation for interior pass rush. And I love the player. Like, that's the kind of guy I'm going to bet on, I think, mentality-wise, from what I can tell from the outside looking in. Darius Robinson, same way. I'm just all in on Darius Robinson. I'm a big fan. Junior Colson, we'll see. It's going to be weird to try to figure out that role year one. Know that you want to put him on a line of scrimmage because I don't know that he's that kind of pass rusher, but as an off-ball backer, he can blitz. But I think in the future, man, him and Campbell, like, yo, I'd love to see those two play together. But, you know, hey, I just want best player there. Andrew Phillips, I could see why the Lions would love a guy like this. And we need cornerback help, so it just makes sense. He would be a good offset skill set-wise to Carlton Davis. Definitely doesn't match his size and length, but he'd be a good offset if he was starting opposite. And then on the offense, getting Malik Washington, it's not about replacing Josh. It's about getting a really nice receiver, and that's what I did. And then, of course, got to get a backup center. So I'm going to leave right there. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.